Next topic we're talking about is Matthew Perry. So Matthew Perry from Friends fame, Chandler from Friends, passed away on, I think it was Saturday or Sunday. I can't remember what day it was that it was announced. But before we actually get into the actual topic of today with this story, one thing that I found really interesting, Dr. Rod, is when I heard about this story, I was with a group of friends, and it was a group of males and females and all everything like that. Every single female that was in that group all got really, really, really sad in that moment. They were like almost to the point of crying, and us guys are like, "Oh, he died? That's sad." But like, now condolences to his family, and it sucks that he's passed away. And so please, don't think we're being heartless with this. But I just found it really interesting. Why is it that a celebrity, that these girls in the group, they had never knew him, only knew a character that he played, didn't even know him, only knew a character he played. Why is it that when a celebrity passes, it has such an impact on people?
Well, I think one reason is we do think we know them. We've watched them, in our lounge room for whatever it was. I think it was 10 seasons, wasn't it? They didn't get to their 11th.
Yeah.
And so they become familiar. You do get familiar with the character, but ultimately, of course, that familiarity passes over to the actor or actress themselves. So I think it's understandable that people would be upset, and I think women often are much more expressive of their emotions than men as well. So it doesn't surprise me that all the women in your group were expressing a great deal of regret at his passing, particularly at the circumstances of his passing.
Yep.
And for those who know that he spent about half his life in rehab, there's a great deal of sadness in his life. He had a lot of major obstacles to overcome.
Yeah. So let's get on to that. The thing that, in line with our leadership theme that we wanted to talk about today is, when this first was announced, it was announced that he had a cardiac arrest. There was no drugs involved. He was alone. All this sort of stuff, right? Like instantly, that was the instant report. Now we're looking a couple of days later. Now the reports say that, someone found him. So obviously there was someone with him. It's possible the coroners are saying it's now a drowning rather than a cardiac arrest. And the paramedics, noticed drowning, that's what they noted when they first arrived. They're doing a toxicology report because they suspect drugs. And obviously, like you mentioned, he spent most of his time in rehab, and he is open about his ongoing challenge with drug use and drug reliance, etc. Why is it that when these things are reported, first of all, it's like that they were very very, what's the right, overt, or they were very forward in saying no drugs involved, and it was just a cardiac arrest. There was nothing more about it. Why is it that when something happens, our instant response, and this is as leaders, I'm not talking about someone passing and us talking about news reporters. I'm talking about us as leaders. When something happens, our natural response is to try to cover it up. Our natural response is to try to protect reputation, all those sorts of things. Why is that our instant response?
I don't know whether I can answer that. You need someone who's trained in psychology to answer that. But it's a funny thing about the media, isn't it? While people are alive, they want to find all the dirt. And then when people die, they want to cover it up. So I can't really figure that out, frankly. Yeah. But I think we do have a tendency to want to protect people in death. We want to protect their reputation and also the feelings of their families and their loved ones. So it's natural, I think. But of course, what happens with the news media is they've still got to get a story. So they don't want to merely announce that someone has died.
Yeah.
They want to sort of pull it apart, dissect it, and turn a paragraph into a page, so to speak. And then, in a way, they've got an incentive to keep the story alive because he's well known. When somebody becomes, a fairly successful actor, then they become public property to some extent. And we've talked about this on previous podcasts, of course. And we ourselves have talked about how we could increase our own ratings by focusing on particular individuals. And we made the decision not to do that, not to chase the ratings, so to speak. But it's a very different game for people in the media. And I think also human beings have a tendency to want to complete the circle. And when we don't know, we tend to make it up. Or, to put it more nicely, we tend to speculate.
Yes.
And it seems to find its way into the media. And then it can go on for days and days. And, of course, we've had the spectacle of people coming, oh, well, he had a COVID vaccination, so it must be the COVID vaccination. And, that blew up for a day or two on social media, which I think's pretty unfortunate. We can tackle the whole issue of the dangers of COVID vaccination in different ways, I think, in better ways.
Yeah.
It's very sad. Look, the lifestyle of the rich and famous is something that we really should do a lot more research on, I think, because so many don't live as long as they should. I don't think they get to make anything like the contribution they could make to the flourishing of humankind because they're usually immensely talented people. They are very, very hardworking in the main. But artistic people tend to also be people who become extremely self-reflective, and they often suffer from depression.
Yeah.
And more than anything, they need our compassion. And, in my own reflection on the passing of Matthew Perry, I kept thinking, maybe I shouldn't just be the business pastor. Because I'm acutely aware of how difficult it is for people in business to deal. They can pretty much cope with most of their business issues, but it's really struggling with issues of faith and family and, dealing with sin and so on. These are the things that business people need a lot of help with because they can get coaches and mentors. That's not hard. And of course, you and I both know good ones. But they're not often pastored. And if you talk to them, and I think something similar goes on for the rich and famous in general, and probably they've got a lot more to lose than you and I have by levelling with someone as well. So it's very sad, I think, that they're not surrounded by people whom they can absolutely trust to unburden themselves to. So it saddens me greatly. It does. What do we do as leaders? I think as leaders we need to develop the capacity for great compassion. We really do. We need to have compassion, and we need to outwork that in our words and in our actions as well.
Yeah. So, you mentioned about protecting his legacy, and we want to protect that. Let's shift from the idea of Matthew Perry, the sad story, but let's bring this back into leadership. What does this mean for leaders? Because we as leaders do tend to do want to cover things up or protect people in our organization. They made mistakes. We've spoken about it previously with some pretty high influence, high reputation pastors that we've spoken about recently. That they're all now in trouble because they're trying to cover things up and everything like that. What's that balance as a leader to be able to protect those that are following us, but still be responsible and not hiding?
Well, yeah. Look, we've talked before about that balance between what is private and what is public, and I think that in general we appropriate too much as public property.
Yes.
From individuals. And I think that's one of the things that makes it difficult for leaders who do have a high profile as influencers in social media, in the corporate world, in the church world, and sports world, and so on. I think that we probably need to be protective of that which is private, but also, and I find this very difficult myself, of course, we've got to have some people around us whom we can trust enough to be totally honest with. What we see of people in the media, that's never going to be the real person. That you must have some people in your life with whom you can be real. That's going to have to be your thermostat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not easy. I think in many ways, the greater your public profile, the more difficult it actually is to find people like that, people to be your thermostat, so to speak. Perhaps those of us who are Christians should work on that and should become examples of how to manage that difficult balance between the private and the public better, how we can be open and honest with that small group of people whom we trust. Unfortunately, look, there isn't a lot of trust in the world today, frankly. And trust is the most important currency there is. I just don't think there's anything that comes anywhere near it. But the currency has been debased so much in modern society that I just think these people are left lonely. Most leaders will tell you the worst thing about leadership is the loneliness.
Yeah, that's true. I remember when I first started focusing on actual leadership was when, like, I've always kind of found myself in leadership positions, but I remember the first time I really was consciously aware of leadership was when I was leading the church. And in that, I realized that, hold on a second, I'm struggling to be truly honest. Now, I wasn't putting on a facade. I wasn't fake or anything like that. I was real. I'm who I am. But there's some thoughts and some things you keep to yourself because I can't share it with, the people I was leading at the time were my friends because it's who you do in life with and everything. I couldn't share it with my friends because I'm leading them and kind of I'm not quite sure. I want to put on the best outcome for them, and then the person who's my leader, well, I'm trying to impress him because he's, I want him to have a good opinion on because he's the one that can open up doors for me and everything like that. And so I found in that moment, I realized that there's no one I can open up to 100%. I can share some things with people, but I've always got to kind of be a little guarded. And that's when I found someone that I was able to talk to that was kind of outside of that. And he was actually a pastor from another church on the opposite side of the country. And he actually really helped me understand that. I was able to open up to him. And it really, really strengthened my leadership because I'm like, now I'm talking this out. I mean, the Bible talks about, confessing your sins to your brethren and stuff like that. Like, there's a reason for that. That's not so that you can confess your sins and be forgiven from them or whatever. It's like, we need to verbalize things because if we're not verbalizing things, we're keeping them inside. We don't know what they're doing to us inside. We may be making a decision that maybe not right, or maybe doing an action that kind of like, well, if we keep it to ourselves, we know it's not right. So that thing's just going to grow and fester and become even worse. And unfortunately, what happens then is we see it all across the church, and we actually see, you see it's, how would I say, it's highlighted, or it's under a magnifying glass, I believe, in churches, but it happens to all leaders in all organizations that they have a moral failing. They keep something to themselves and not share it with those key people that are important, and then eventually it comes out in a negative way and leads to some mistakes. So yeah.
Look, I think your experience of finding a pastor who's outside your immediate environment who could actually pastor you, I think that's really important. And that's one of the main motivations I have as the business pastor. I'm not.
Yep.
I never ask people for money. I don't use it as an opportunity to build the church that I pastor. I actually encourage them to find a church locally and engage in that. We can go into that in more detail some other time, but I do think it's really important. So for most leaders, they need to find someone or a small group of people outside their organisation with whom they can have these very honest conversations and receive honest, fearless feedback. But it's rare. It's very rare.
And I've got to jump in and do a bit of a selfish promotion for you, Dr. Rod, is that's why you're my pastor, because you understand me and my unique challenges as a business owner, and you're able to guide me with great wisdom. And you have helped me so much over the years over the 12, 13 years that we've known each other. You've helped me a lot. And I've been able to be completely open and honest with you, and you've been able to talk me through some very, very tough personal challenges. And I believe that I'm only where I am now, having walked through those personal challenges and believing that I'm in a good position, I suppose. I haven't, I feel like I've made mistakes along the way, but I feel like I've done the best. Like I'd be very open to anyone knowing everything that I've done because you had guided me along the way, and I always had that, that angel, I suppose, on my shoulder. Even when we're not talking, I shared this with you last week. Like, I've actually been going through some other challenges that I haven't spoken to you about, not because I'm hiding it from you, because I'm like, actually, I don't need to talk to you about it because I've got your voice in my ear giving me the guidance because you've already helped me through this thing before with something else. And I think we all need that. And so I encourage you, find yourself a pastor. And if you're a business owner and you need a pastor that you feel like your pastor doesn't understand you, I'm not telling you to change church or anything like that. Maybe reach out to Dr. Rod. He is the business pastor. He is there for business people. He's my pastor. He's my mentor. He's someone who guides me and mentors me through all my challenges. And reach out to him and see. Put a comment below or whatever. Reach out to us on social. Reach out to me on social, and I'll connect you guys, or you can find him on socials. And maybe he's the support that you're actually needing. So it was a little bit of a shameless plug for you, Dr. Rod, but it's not really a plug because it's not like you make money from it. But because like he said, he doesn't charge. But if you feel like giving to his ministry, then of course, that's what I do.
Yeah, a pastor doesn't charge.
No,
it's as simple as that. Pastors don't charge.
In the kingdom, we believe in generosity, and I believe that principle in my business as well.
Mentors and coaches, definitely.
Yeah.
And look, I'm aware of some businesses who pay intercessors, and I think that's fine as well. But pastoring's a little bit different, and that's the way I feel. My own denomination, I think, would be horrified if they discovered that there was someone holding themselves out of the business pastor and then holding out their hand at the same time for money. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work that way.
No.
But anyway.
You can't ask, but I can tell of what I do as a business owner. Be generous and support the ministry that is supporting you. But that's that's just what I've got to say. But Dr. Rod, I want to jump back on something that you mentioned before, because it was something that you and I actually spoke about in our private conversation last week about people will fill in the gap. People will get a bit of information and then fill in the gap with the rest with whatever they think is real. And obviously that's something that's happening with Matthew Perry's thing. And I think this is a really good leadership principle for us to understand, is you and I talking about some personal things, and I was sharing that someone's spreading rumors about me, and then they're not nice, not nice and not true rumors. And you just went, well, you got to make sure that there's not as big of. I'm paraphrasing what you said, and I'm structuring it slightly differently. But you pretty much said, like, make sure you're doing enough to fill in as much of the gap as possible, so there's less of a gap for people to fill in, right? Like there's, so make sure you don't do anything that is perceived or could be perceived, for someone to interpret in a certain way, so that they can fill in that gap with some things that are false and make up stories that aren't true about you. So I think that's a really good leadership principle, is understand that when you keep information from people, which you should, like there's not everything should be public, like Dr. Rod and I have spoken about on many podcasts before, but make sure that there's not too much of a gap that people will fill in with their own opinions and then form an opinion on it, and it'll be a completely infactual, and then spread bad rumors about you. So be careful, be very careful by your actions. Make sure nothing can be perceived to be misinterpreted at all. And that's something that I remember I first learned when I got into ministry, is like, don't be in a car alone with a woman. Like, don't be, don't take, when you're dropping kids off at youth, don't be in a car alone with a kid, and just all those sorts of, like, just don't be in your room alone. Don't, all those sorts of things. Make sure you always got someone else with you, and all those sorts of things, so that you can make sure that you are protecting yourself from bad rumors. So you mentioned that before, and I just wanted to jump back on that, Dr. Rob. Hey, you just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you like that, hit the like button and put a comment below. Hey, if you want to watch more videos like this, check out our channel, and while you're there, make sure you subscribe.